Reimagining Success, episode 286. And this episode is for you if you are an individual who is struggling in the face of relentless demand on your attention from work and from home, or I should say, if you are a leader who cares about your team's productivity and how they are facing and addressing these challenges on their time and energy. So what is it we can do to rise above this kind of reactive survival mode, the busy work, the frantic ploughing through tasks, and really take a step back and look at what matters and how we can channel our, let's face it, limited resources, limited time and energy into really doing what matters, what's going to move the needle for our business, for the organisation, for ourselves as individuals and as our families. Hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to Reimagining Success, your compass for navigating a world where the traditional 9 to 5 no longer fits our needs or aspirations. I'm your host, Anna Lundberg, former corporate insider turned business mentor, executive coach, and mum of 2, here to guide you as you craft a career and a life that's filled with freedom, flexibility, and fulfillment. Join me as I uncover actionable strategies, share inspirational stories, and equip you with the tools to thrive in today's evolving workplace. Ready to redefine success? Let's get started. The world today is incredibly fast-paced and the work environment is evolving more than ever. And the more I get into this, the more I believe that personal productivity is absolutely crucial to living a life that feels rewarding and fulfilling, to having job satisfaction, to feeling engaged with work, and to getting the things done that we want to get done. So really focusing on what matters. And that's of vital importance, both for us as individuals, of course, but also then as a company, as a society, where we need to be focusing on what really matters. And in particular, of course, since the pandemic, we've had this acceleration towards hybrid and working from home. There are all these technological advancements with AI and so on. So we just have more and more challenges in managing our priorities with all these relentless demands on our time, but hopefully also more opportunities to do so. So even though there are so many training topics, training materials, books, and so on, hacks on time management, burnout rates unfortunately continue to rise, and we feel overwhelmed. We feel we are stretched thin. So if we look at some statistics, and I'm sure these won't be too shocking to you, 1 in 2 employees are open to leaving their organisation. The 2 biggest areas of dissatisfaction are actually engagement and culture on the one hand, and well-being and work-life balance on the other. We hear about these trends of quiet quitting, so not being engaged, and that's more than half of employees at the moment, and loud quitting, which is when they're really actively disengaged. And in fact, if we want to quantify this, low employee engagement costs the global economy $8.8 trillion. So whether we care altruistically about people's health and stress and burnout and so on, or with our organisational hats on, we care about absenteeism, turnover, productivity, or we're economists and politicians who care about the global economy, this is an incredibly, incredibly critical topic to look at. And again, despite all that training and all this awareness of this topic, we still have this sense of overwhelm. We still feel torn into 2. In fact, more than 2 are torn in all these different directions with all the different roles we have. And speaking of roles, we have these blurred boundaries now between work and personal life in this remote era. And that's not just since the pandemic, that's really since digital tools became available in the 80s, 90s. So work-life balance, maintaining that kind of sense of balance, and even, as I call it, work-life integration, has become increasingly elusive. But we are seeing more of an emphasis being placed in organisations on employee well-being. There's definitely a growing recognition of the importance of addressing this concept of personal productivity. And again, if you need any more justification of the importance of this topic, research really does show that employees who feel that they're empowered to manage their own time, their workload, so they're more autonomous and free, are more engaged, more resilient, and more productive. And that leads to improved business outcomes, competitive advantage, which is also critical in the highly competitive landscape today, both in terms of products as well as in terms of talent. And so if we look at the workplace, and I use that term quite broadly to include people in the office, people at home, people working for themselves, really, we're all kind of operating at different levels of productivity, different levels of engagement. And so we're each contributing differently to the success of the business or the organization. So, and we covered this in the last few weeks of the podcast. If you want to double click on any of these kind of levels, then do go back to the last few weeks. At one end of the spectrum, we have the extreme overwhelm where individuals are burned out. So really facing challenges, if not burned out, then burning out, facing challenges in maintaining performance, disengaged certainly through no fault of their own, and not making a huge contribution to the business, to the organization. They're completely overwhelmed by the demands of their roles and health issues. And then you've got the sort of disengaged people, but they're kind of delivering there and towards the bottom end of the spectrum. You've then got the core engine really of the organization who are getting things done, they're meeting expectations, but, you know, could they be caught in that busy work trap? Are they really making a difference in a bigger sense, in the sense of innovation and preparing for the future and so on? And then at the top end of the spectrum, you have those star players who are really delivering exceptional results, driving innovation, fostering that culture of high performance among their colleagues. So being role models, not just delivering themselves, but really being those leaders for the organization. And of course, as you find yourself as an employee at different places along that spectrum, your impact on the business will evolve. Of course, it goes without saying that if you're struggling with burnout or feeling highly disengaged, you may unfortunately contribute to inefficiencies and a broader sense of reduced morale within your team, because there's that kind of emotional, social contagion, and that will lead to even more decreased productivity and retention issues. Then if you, again, look at the other end of the spectrum, those individuals who have, and I hesitate to use the word mastered because that's an impossible task, but at least have sought to master personal productivity and are operating at higher levels of engagement, they become really invaluable assets to the organization. And by the way, again, this matters to the company, but also to us as individuals, because we'll get more fulfillment out of it. We'll be rewarded and we'll be progressing in our careers as well. So it's all good news all around. And so as leaders, we need to recognize that diversity of employee experiences and, of course, look for or provide support depending on where we are in the organization accordingly. And that could mean looking at strategies, of course, and there are more and more well-being initiatives and so on to address burnout and disengagement. It could be more around providing career development, opportunities, skill development, growth, learning and development. And it could be and should be probably at a higher level as well, fostering the broader culture that values that work-life balance and well-being, where we're all role modeling these values and it's not just kind of culture on a piece of paper. And so that is the only way I'd say that organizations can unlock the full potential of their business and of the individuals working there and drive success in a sustainable and more holistic way in the competitive landscape today. But if we look at that sort of bottom end of the productivity spectrum, why are so many of us unable to progress and raise ourselves above that sort of operational stuff, the tasks, the things that we're so busy doing to focus on making a more valuable contribution to the organization? Well, unfortunately, in the fast-paced dynamic landscape of today, more than ever before, there is this incredible pressure to deliver immediate results. And so it's so easy to have that reactive mindset where priorities are shifting with each crisis that gets thrown at us. So we have this really short-term focus. We find ourselves in a cycle of busyness, busy, just chasing our tail, ticking off tasks on our to-do list, just dealing with whatever last-minute changes and the projects that are being thrown at us. And productivity becomes almost synonymous just with staying afloat, rather than actually making meaningful progress towards long-term goals, again, both from the organizational perspective and from the individual. So organizations will find themselves in that kind of constant firefighting mode. They'll be spending and dare I say it, wasting resources only on immediate issues, and that comes at the expense of future growth. So you've got sort of best case busy work, worst case survival mode. So sustainable productivity for the long term will only come if we can have a more proactive long-term approach to business operations. And that means setting clear visions, it means aligning activities with our strategic objectives, and it means investing in more lasting value. And again, that requires really a culture of foresight and innovation and positioning ourselves in a way that's going to thrive in the face of uncertainty and adversity. And if I finish on this today, again, if we look at traditional productivity being measured as output per unit of input in terms of labour, that really overlooks the broader factors that affect how we perform as individuals, as teams, as organisations. And traditional time management just isn't enough. There are so many books now. One of my favourites is Oliver Burkeman's 4,000 Weeks, which is the number of weeks we will live on average, which really comes face to face with the inevitability of life being short, time being finite, and therefore, we are mortal. I think he calls it in his subtitle, Time Management for Mere Mortals. So recognizing that, and we will never get through a whole to-do list, and that's not the point. So we need to become so disciplined and mercenary in deleting tasks, refocusing, and making sure we're actually focusing on what matters. But even then, it is not only about effective time management. Yes, that's important, but it's also about managing our energy and managing our attention. So yes, managing our time means we do need to prioritise tasks, we need to set clear goals, we need to optimise our schedule to maximise productivity. But although that's really critical for productivity, that's not enough. It's just one piece of the puzzle. So then we also need to manage our energy levels effectively, because an hour in the morning when I'm at my most focused is very different to an hour at the end of the day when I'm exhausted, just put the kids to bed and so on. We've got the post-lunch carb slump, perhaps. We've got sort of the frazzled state that we end up in after back-to-back meetings. That all affects how we perform. Our energy naturally fluctuates throughout the day, and that impacts our focus and decision making. So understanding our natural energy rhythms, optimizing them, can help us really maximize how we perform, and again, help to prevent burnout as well. And then finally, attention, maintaining focus in the midst of all these external demands, digital distractions, email, social media, phones, etc., is so challenging, and more so. And so again, sort of true productivity involves actually being engaged in our work, not just having time blocked to work on something, but we need to be engaged. We need to find meaning in the work we're doing. We need to be prioritizing tasks that really have a high value that will make a difference, and then filter and focus to get rid of those distractions, or at least minimize them, so we really can channel our attention into, again, what matters most. And so to do all this, I talk about 3 things we need to do, really. And it sounds so simple, but it is so critical to unlocking, I think, our performance as individuals and organisations, our engagement and our well-being. And that's number 1, prioritising, number 2, planning, and number 3, protecting. So just for the last couple of minutes, just want to go through those 3 strategies. So if we imagine we have our time, we have our energy, we have our attention, the first thing we need to do to filter all those external demands is to understand what our priorities are. That's absolutely fundamental to everything else. We need to know what truly matters, and that includes both our work projects and our broader life goals. It can include things like health and family and personal interests and so on, right? Clear priorities is what will allow us to direct our time and attention towards the activities that align with our values and our objectives. And that will then in turn foster a greater sense of purpose and fulfillment, while, good news for business owners and organizations, we also meet our business targets. So prioritizing is as critical from a big picture life meaning perspective as it is from the perspective of work plan and projects in the office. The second one is planning, and planning is really proactively, and that's a really key word, proactively organizing our time and energy. It means that we're scheduling tasks and activities, yes, based on their importance and urgency. We hopefully all know Stephen Covey's urgent and important filter, his Eisenhower matrix, as it's also been called, and aligning those tasks with our energy levels. So if we know when we have our peak energy moments, and it might be first thing in the morning, it might be sort of 11 till 1 or so, it could be later in the day. But if you identify those peak moments and allocate them to the most important, high priority, creative, strategic thinking work, deep work, as Cal Newport might call it, then we can be more efficient and effective in actually accomplishing meaningful work without getting distracted. And then finally, protect. So we've prioritized, we've planned, and we're now protecting our energy and attention. And that means that we're safeguarding our mental and physical well-being, setting boundaries to preserve our energy, prioritizing self-care activities, and crafting environments that are actually conducive to that focus and deep work. If we can minimize the external distractions, if we can prioritize our energy reserves, then we can sustain our productivity and try to avoid burnout as well. So again, coming back to the beginning, really, we want to understand the link between productivity, performance, and engagement, the danger of that reactive, short-term thinking of the busy work and just kind of trying to survive, basically. We're firefighting, there's no strategic direction, we're risking burnout, or best case, there's kind of frantic activity, but lack of progress on important goals. And sustainable personal productivity really comes from not just managing time, but also energy and attention. And to do that, we need those 3 strategic imperatives, which are 1, prioritize, 2, plan, and 3, protect. I'll leave it there, but over the next few weeks, we'll be digging into each of those building blocks, double clicking on them, as it were, in terms of managing your time, first of all, because yes, it is still important, managing your energy and managing your attention. So I hope you'll enjoy this little series on personal productivity. I'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Reimagining Success with Anna Lindberg. Before you go, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. I'll be back next week. I'll see you then.